The front door creaks open. A family member steps inside. Her breath catches as her gaze falls on a trail across the floor. Tiny footprints, soaked in blood. They wind down the staircase. Through the hall. Into the kitchen. Each step belongs to a child, no more than 2 years old. Upstairs, silence waits. And then, the scene no one should ever witness. Michelle Young, a young mother expecting her second child, lies bludgeoned in her bedroom. The house tells a story, but it isn't one of a break-in. There's no shattered glass. No forced entry. This wasn't the work of a stranger. It was something far closer. Someone Michelle knew. Someone Michelle trusted. And in the hours that followed. But before the world knew Michelle as the victim of a brutal crime, she was a vibrant young woman, full of life, love, and dreams that should have carried her far beyond that November night. Before the crime scene defined her story, Michelle Young was so much more than a victim. Long before investigators traced those bloody footprints, Michelle Young was a woman defined by her life, not her death. A graduate of North Carolina State University. A woman with ambition, balancing her career in finance with the joys of being a mother. Friends described Michelle as warm, caring, the kind of person who made others feel at ease. Her smile, they said, could light up a room. And at the center of her world was her 2-year-old daughter, Cassidy. Michelle adored being a mother. She filled her home with laughter, with bedtime stories, with little rituals that made her child feel safe. And she was preparing to do it all again. Michelle was pregnant with her second child. Her family was growing. Her dreams were unfolding. But beneath that picture of happiness, subtle tension stirred. To her friends, Michelle sometimes confided small worries about her marriage. Nothing explosive. Just hints of strain. Money pressures. Jason's frequent travels. The kind of cracks that can widen quietly when no one is looking. Yet Michelle pressed forward, focusing on what she valued most, her daughter, her friends, her future. She filled her calendar with plans, holidays, and milestones she never imagined she wouldn't live to see. This was Michelle's world. A life in motion. A young mother on the edge of something bigger. And it's that very life, so full of promise. And standing closest to Michelle's world was her husband, Jason. To friends, he was charming. But behind closed doors, their marriage carried shadows no one yet fully understood. To many on the outside, Jason appeared confident, outgoing, a man who knew how to charm a room. He was athletic, career-driven, someone who seemed to have a handle on life. Friends described him as quick with a joke, easy to talk to. On the surface, he played the part of a devoted husband and father. Yet just beneath that polished surface, a different story was unfolding inside their home. There were whispers, small comments Michelle had made, moments of tension that didn't align with the cheerful image seen by others. Money was often a strain. Jason's work required travel, and the long nights apart left space for unease. Friends recalled that Michelle sometimes worried about where he was and who he was with. And though nothing ever seemed certain, the word infidelity occasionally surfaced in conversations she had with those she trusted. Resentment, too, seemed to simmer quietly. Michelle's growing responsibilities at home, paired with Jason's absence, created a distance that neither could ignore. Still, to the outside world, their marriage looked intact. A smiling couple. A young family with their future ahead of them. And Jason, for all his flaws, was not yet seen as dangerous. But as investigators would later learn, the divide between appearances and reality can be wide. And in that gap, and on one November night, those quiet tensions would erupt into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. On the evening of November 2nd, 2006, Michelle Young went about her life as any other young mother might. She made plans with friends. She cared for her daughter. She prepared for another ordinary night at home. Yet when friends looked back on that day, the small, almost unspoken details suddenly felt like warnings. Conversations Michelle had with those close to her now carry a weight they didn't at the time. Friends later remembered moments where she seemed tired, uneasy, as though something heavy rested just beneath her smile. That night, the house grew quiet. Her daughter asleep in her room. Michelle settling into the evening routines that had become familiar. Outside, darkness wrapped around their Raleigh neighborhood. The kind of suburban stillness that made everything feel safe. But behind those walls, a storm was waiting. At some point in the night, the silence broke. What followed was sudden, violent, merciless. Michelle Young was attacked in her own bedroom. The brutality left behind would later shock even seasoned investigators. No neighbors reported screams. No one saw an intruder. It was as though the violence had erupted in secret, hidden behind closed doors. By morning, that home was no longer a place of safety. It was a scene of horror. And in the hours to come, and it would be Michelle's own sister, who stepped into that house the next morning and uncovered a nightmare carved into the walls of her family's home. The following morning, Michelle's sister, Meredith, arrived at the house. She expected an ordinary visit. But as she stepped inside, the silence felt heavy. Not the calm of a quiet morning, but the kind of silence that warns you something is terribly wrong. As she stepped inside, her eyes fell to the floor. Tiny footprints, stained in blood. They led her through the house. Each step belonging to little Cassidy, Michelle's 2-year-old daughter. Meredith followed the trail upstairs. She found Michelle, brutally beaten, lifeless. It was a scene too horrific to process. A young mother, expecting her second child, gone. And just feet away, her daughter, still in her pajamas, had wandered alone through the aftermath. The image of Cassidy's small footprints marked more than just a crime scene. They carried the unbearable weight of innocence colliding with violence. A child who should have been shielded from all harm, instead left to walk through the unthinkable. Meredith's call to 911 brought the first officers racing to the scene. But even seasoned investigators paused at what they found. This was not random. This was personal.
Okay. It's an emergency. What address are you at, ma'am? Ma'am, what's your phone number in case I lose you? Problem, tell me exactly what happened.
I think my sister's dead.
Okay, tell me what happened, ma'am.
I have no idea. Oh my God.
All right, stay on the phone with me, please. What's your name?
Meredith Fisher.
Meredith.
And this is a young address. Oh my God.
Meredith, listen to me, please.
Yeah.
Are you with the patient now?
Yes, I'm her daughter. And
okay. How old is the patient?
And there's blood everywhere. She's 28, 29.
28?
Should I try to move her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you what to do,
okay.
But you need to calm down so we can help her. You said there's blood everywhere?
Yes.
All right, is she conscious?
No, I don't think so. Should I try to help her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
I'm listening.
Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Have you checked?
Michelle, she's cold.
Okay. Listen to me. Did you see what happened?
I don't know. Cassie, come here, sweetie. I'm here with her daughter.
Okay.
There's like blood footprints all over the house.
Okay, listen
my daughter,
to me.
like her daughter's little footprints.
Okay, listen to me. What's your first name?
Meredith.
All right, Meredith.
Yes, sir.
Did you see what happened?
I just came here on a fluke. I usually, don't come here during the day.
Okay.
She shouldn't be home. She should be at work.
Okay, listen to me.
Yes, sir. Hey, did you know what happened to Mommy? Did she fall?
She got dizzy everywhere, and she got...
Do you think she's beyond any help?
I don't know, honestly.
You don't know? All right.
I'm normally very good under pressure.
We're going to tell you what to do then, okay?
Yes, sir.
Are you right by her now?
I'm keeping her daughter out of there.
Okay. All right, so you're not with her?
I'm right outside the bedroom.
All right. Can you get her daughter secured? Can you carry the phone into where she's at?
Yes.
All right. Can you secure her daughter?
Cassidy, sweetie, can you stay in your room for 2 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Can you close the door for 2 seconds? I'll be right back in there, okay, sweetie?
All right. Can you get her on her back?
Okay. Oh, my God. Michelle? I don't think so. She's so heavy.
Let's see if you can get her on her back.
I really think she's dead.
Pardon?
I really think she's dead.
Okay. You can't roll her over?
Not easily.
Are you going to have to try?
Hang on, I'm trying to see if I can get her pulse.
We got to try to do CPR if we can get her on the back, Meredith.
No, she's ice cold.
She's cold? Okay. All right.
And her body is stiff.
Okay. Then don't try. If she's cold, then this
oh my God,
there's probably nothing else you can do.
Should I not touch anything?
All right. Try not to touch anything more than you did. Was anything out of place or unusual when you came in?
This place does not look like what it normally looks like.
Okay.
There's blood in the bed.
Okay. All right, try not to touch anything else, okay?
Okay, I just moved the pillow.
Just leave everything exactly where it is then.
And for Michelle's family, grief hit with an unbearable force. Their sister, their daughter, their loved one, ripped from them in a single night. The house now held more than grief, it held questions that demanded answers. And investigators were about to focus their attention on the one person who should have been Michelle's protector, her husband. Detectives began to retrace Michelle's final hours. They studied every detail of her last day, searching for answers hidden in the ordinary. Who had entered her home? Who had the opportunity? And who might have carried such violence into her quiet neighborhood? But as they studied the scene more closely, one unsettling detail began to rise above everything else. There was no sign of forced entry. No broken doors. No shattered glass. Whoever stepped into Michelle's home that night was either welcomed inside or already belonged there. Burglary was ruled out. Nothing had been stolen. Jewelry, electronics, valuables, everything remained untouched. This was not a random attack. It was something more personal, something far darker. As investigators sifted through the crime scene, they began looking beyond the walls of the house, into Michelle's relationships. Friends quietly shared stories, moments they had noticed tension, words spoken in frustration, glances that revealed distance. Whispers of a marriage under strain began to take shape. And slowly, a name began to surface. Not from strangers. Not from enemies. But from within the very circle closest to Michelle. Her husband, Jason. At first, the thought was spoken only in hushed tones. Could the man who shared her life, who was meant to protect her, possibly have turned into the focus of suspicion? The pieces weren't forming a complete picture yet, but investigators felt the pull of a pattern. A crime with no outsider. A family torn apart from within. The suspicion that began as a whisper was now impossible to ignore. And soon, investigators would start gathering the kind of evidence that could no longer be explained away. Jason Young told detectives he hadn't been home the night Michelle was killed. He said he was hundreds of miles away on a business trip. At first, it sounded like a clean break from suspicion. But investigators knew, an alibi is only as strong as the evidence that supports it. They began tracing his movements, step by step. Hotel records confirmed Jason had checked into a Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia. Surveillance footage even captured him walking through the lobby. On the surface, his story seemed airtight. But airtight doesn't always mean unbreakable. Detectives discovered Jason had left the hotel during the night. The surveillance cameras showed gaps. Hours unaccounted for. And when they asked about his timeline, the details felt rehearsed, almost too precise. The oddest moment came when hotel staff remembered a peculiar scene. Jason, barefoot, asking about the hotel's security cameras. It was a small detail, yet it raised a chilling question. Why would an innocent man care so much about surveillance? Still, suspicion alone wasn't enough. The evidence was suggestive, but not conclusive. Jason's alibi, though fragile, had not yet collapsed. The law demanded proof, and investigators knew they had to build something stronger than hunches. Because if the alibi was cracking at the edges, what they uncovered next threatened to shatter it completely. The closer detectives looked at Jason Young's alibi, the more the seams began to split. Hotel staff remembered him leaving the building in the middle of the night. Not once, but twice. Each time, he slipped quietly into the darkness. When asked about it later, his explanations were vague. Too vague. Even stranger, one of the hotel's security cameras had been tampered with. The angle was shifted. The feed disrupted. Investigators couldn't prove who had done it. But the timing lined up with Jason's overnight wanderings. It was the kind of coincidence that no longer felt like chance. Then came the most troubling discovery of all. Jason's rental car showed mileage that didn't match his supposed route. It was far too high for a simple round trip. The extra distance, almost identical to the miles it would take to drive from the hotel back to Raleigh, and then return before dawn. Piece by piece, the ordinary mask of a business trip was giving way to something darker. Something deliberate. Detectives began to see a new possibility. That Jason Young hadn't simply stayed away that night. that he might have made the drive back home, that he could have been in the house. It was a breakthrough investigators could not ignore. Suspicion was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. But suspicions alone would never be enough. To bring Jason Young down, investigators needed evidence that could hold in court, and their next moves would uncover just that. In the weeks that followed Michelle's death, her family was left reeling. Her sister and parents poured their love and attention into little Cassidy, determined to shield her from the nightmare that had shattered their world. The toddler who once toddled happily beside her mother now carried the invisible weight of a night she could never understand. For Michelle's family, every smile, every laugh, was bittersweet, a reminder of the future she had been denied. At the same time, Jason Young stepped into the role of grieving husband. Publicly he wept. He spoke of his wife's memory. He positioned himself as a man whose world had collapsed. Yet, when the spotlight dimmed, his sorrow didn't always align with his actions. The mask of grief began to slip, and behind it, something far more unsettling emerged. The divide only deepened as suspicion lingered. Some in Jason's orbit clung to the belief in his innocence, convinced that a husband and father could never commit such an act. But for Michelle's family, the inconsistencies in his story, the strange behavior, the unanswered questions, were impossible to ignore. Love for Cassidy united them. Yet the shadow of doubt split them apart. The emotional toll was overwhelming. A family grieving the loss of a daughter. A little girl growing up without her mother. And a husband whose every move was now under a cloud. And soon, the raw grief of Michelle's loved ones would meet the cold precision of forensic science. Because investigators were about to uncover evidence that would change everything. Detectives knew they couldn't rely on suspicion alone. They needed hard evidence. Forensics from the Young home were re-examined, every stain and fiber scrutinized for answers. Phone records were pulled, tracing Jason's movements and contacts in the hours before and after Michelle's death. Each data point added weight to a growing suspicion that Jason's alibi might not be the shield he thought it was. As the investigation deepened, friends of Michelle began to share details that painted a darker picture of her marriage. Her words, once spoken in quiet moments of trust, took on new gravity. She had hinted at feeling uneasy, at times even unsafe. Those private fears, brushed aside when life seemed busy and full, now echoed with chilling clarity. The most unsettling revelations came from those who had seen Jason at his worst. Accounts of a short fuse, a temper that could flare without warning. Stories that suggested his charm had a dangerous edge when the doors were closed. To friends and family, these memories, once dismissed as ordinary quarrels, now seemed like red flags waving in hindsight. With forensics aligning against him, with phone records exposing holes, and with testimony revealing a troubling pattern, the portrait of Jason Young shifted. No longer the image of a grieving husband, but a man under a shadow that grew darker with each passing day. And soon, investigators would stop sifting through the past and start testing Jason in the present. Their next move would push him into the spotlight, where every reaction could betray the truth. The pressure had been mounting for weeks. Investigators quietly piecing together phone records, forensics, and testimonies. Finally, they reached a tipping point. The weight of the evidence was enough. And with that, the moment arrived. Jason Young was arrested. The news sent ripples through Raleigh and beyond. For some, it was a moment of complete disbelief. A husband, a father, a man many thought they knew, now in handcuffs. For others, the sight of him in custody felt less like a shock, and more like the moment they had dreaded, yet expected all along. The unease Michelle had voiced to friends, the temper that others had whispered about, suddenly, all of it seemed impossible to ignore. The community watched as the story broke across every major outlet. Headlines painted the picture of a picture-perfect suburb unraveling into something far darker. Michelle's murder and Jason's arrest became more than just a local tragedy. It was the kind of case that captured national attention. The kind of story that seemed ripped straight from the darkest headlines of a crime novel. Neighbors, friends, and coworkers gave interviews, their voices carrying a mix of sorrow and shock. Some still held out hope that maybe the system had it wrong. Others said justice was finally in motion. One thing was certain, the trial ahead would hold the answers. Now that Jason sat behind bars, the real battle was only beginning. A courtroom would decide his fate, and every secret, every doubt, every painful truth was about to be dragged into the light. The courtroom filled with a heavy silence as prosecutors laid out their case. Step by step, they built a timeline that painted a clear picture. Phone records, financial data, and witness testimony placed Jason uncomfortably close to the crime scene on the very night Michelle was killed. Each detail tightened the net. Each fact chipped away at the image of the grieving husband he tried so hard to project. But Jason's defense team fought back. They argued he wasn't there. They floated alibis, suggesting others could have been responsible. They highlighted every possible gap in the state's case, trying to sow doubt in the minds of the jurors. It became a clash of stories, the prosecution tightening its grip with hard evidence, while the defense worked to unravel it thread by thread. The tension inside that courtroom was palpable. Family members sat divided, friends leaned forward in their seats, and reporters typed furiously as the case unfolded. On one side stood the story of a woman brutally murdered in her own home. On the other stood a man claiming innocence, fighting for his freedom. Each testimony became a battle, each piece of evidence a weapon. And with every passing hour, the stakes grew higher. Because this was no longer just about suspicion. It was about whether 12 strangers would believe the state's version of events, or Jason's. And as the trial edged closer to its conclusion, one truth became clear. No matter the verdict, the lives left in Michelle's absence would never be the same. The air inside the courtroom grew heavier with each passing moment. What had begun as speculation and shadows was now laid bare in stark testimony. The jury listened closely as witness after witness revealed unsettling details. Jason's manipulations, the lies he spun, and the temper that seemed to lurk just beneath the surface. Every account carried weight, not just as memory, but as lived warning, revealing a man whose charm was a mask, and whose true self emerged only in the shadows of closed doors. Friends and family testified to Michelle's quiet fears, and the prosecution made sure those fears echoed in the minds of every juror. It all built toward one unshakable crescendo. The prosecution's final blow was not in volume, but in precision. With a deliberate, steady voice, they walked the jury through the timeline, the evidence, and the motives. Every contradiction in Jason's alibi, every violent outburst from his past, every manipulation that had surfaced, it all converged here. This was not the picture of a grieving husband. This was the portrait of a killer. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Guilty. Jason Young was found guilty of the murder of his wife, Michelle. For Michelle's family, it was a moment of relief tangled with grief. Justice had been delivered, but it could never bring her back. But even with the verdict delivered, the echoes of Michelle's absence lingered, leaving behind a family forced to pick up the pieces and a community left to question what justice can heal and what it never will. In the wake of the verdict, Michelle Young's family faced the most difficult task of all, learning how to live without her. She had been a daughter, a sister, a friend, and above all, a devoted mother. Those who loved her spoke of her warmth, her laughter, and the way she lit up every room she entered. Now, those memories became both a comfort and a reminder of everything stolen from them. For Michelle's young daughter, the weight of that loss was even heavier. She had been spared physically, but the emotional scars of that night were impossible to erase. She would grow up without her mother's guiding hand, without her presence at birthdays, graduations, or the quiet moments that make up a life. Even in her innocence, the silence of that night clung to her, a haunting reminder that survival does not always mean freedom from pain. The community, too, felt the aftershocks. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers struggled to reconcile how a marriage that once appeared picture-perfect could descend into violence so horrific. The story spread far beyond Raleigh, resonating with anyone who had ever trusted in love, only to see that trust betrayed. Michelle's death became more than a crime story. It became a symbol of loss, resilience, and the fragility of human relationships. But as the years passed, one question lingered: what lessons could be drawn from Michelle's story, And how could her legacy speak louder than her tragedy? A tragedy like this doesn't come from the shadows of strangers. It rises from within the walls of a home, the place meant to protect, to nurture, to hold love steady. For Michelle's family, the deepest wound was not caused by the world outside, but by the one who once vowed to stand beside her. Her story leaves us staring into the uncomfortable truth that danger does not always knock on the door. Sometimes, it already lives inside. And when it does, the devastation is far more personal, far more lasting, because it comes from the very person trusted most. Her daughter, who was spared in body but scarred in soul, carried footprints that would never fade. Tiny steps, imprinted in blood, spoke of innocence interrupted. They are not just marks on a floor. They are symbols of a night that altered a child's life forever. And for the community, they remain a haunting image of how fragile safety can be. Michelle Young's life was more than her final moments. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a mother who loved fiercely. But her story is also a warning of hidden fractures, of ignored fears, and of the cost when love turns into violence. And so, Michelle's case leaves us not only with grief, but with a question that still lingers long after the verdict was read. And now I leave the question with you. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And while this chapter closes, the world of true crime continues to reveal stories of deception, double lives, and the tragic cost of misplaced trust. Next time, we'll uncover another chilling story of betrayal and tragedy. Before you go, if you found this story compelling, insightful, or important, please like this video, share it with someone who cares about true crime awareness, and subscribe for more in-depth, narrative-driven documentaries. Your support helps these stories reach more people, honor the victims, and keep their memories alive.